Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we've got a time travel author here this week, which I'm excited about because I don't think we've ever had a time travel writer on the show. Monique Martin is her name, and she was actually publishing when I got started. I remember seeing her book everywhere on keyboards and on selling really well on Amazon, so she can give us the perspective of, having been in the industry for a few years. But Monique, let me read your bio really quick that I stole off of Amazon, and then we'll let you talk.
Okay.
All right. Monique was born in Houston, Texas, and currently resides in Southern California with her naughty Siamese cat, Monkey. Monique attended the University of Southern California's Film School, where she earned a BFA from the Filmic Writing Department. She's the author of the Out of Time series, which, as I said, she's been keeping going for several years now, and I believe she has a new one coming out this summer. Is that book 10, Monique? Did I see that?
Yes, I can't believe it's book 10.
Awesome. And then another reason I think it's great to have you on is we've had some guests on, they're like, you should just publish a book every month, and then it'll be awesome. But that's... I hear from our listeners that that's not realistic for everybody, so I think it's cool that it looks like you've maybe been managing about 2 a year or so.
Yeah, maybe 2.5. I'm the poster child for not writing fast enough.
Well, it's good to know that you can still sell books when you're not publishing a book a month.
It's possible, but it is they are right. The faster you go, the better off you are. So I'm trying to increase my speed, but I keep finding ways to complicate my own life. So.
I can imagine. Well, why don't you start out telling us how you started writing and what led you to self-publishing?
Well, I started off working in film and television after I went to, as you said, USC Film School. And filmic was a word they coined. It's not even a word, but it was basically screenwriting. And I worked in production and post-production in television on Murder, She Wrote, and In the Heat of the Night, some old shows, dating myself a little bit there. And then got sucked into the family business briefly, which was soul-sucking, and it was insurance marketing of all things, not lighting up the sky there with insurance marketing. And so to keep my sanity, I wrote at night, and I decided for reasons I don't know to write a book. I had an idea for a short story that grew and grew and grew. This is my first time ever writing prose of any kind. And it was right when Buffy the Vampire Slayer was very popular, again, dating myself, and hence the reason for the vampire in the book, which I probably wouldn't do if I had it all to do over again. And I wrote the book at night, had no plan, zero plan. There was no such thing as self-publishing or indie publishing at the time. It was, I suppose, 2009 or 2008 when I finished the book, so that was really, really early in the process. And I tried for about 3 months in a very sort of half-assed manner to get an agent, and ended up just giving up. It just felt like I was never going to make it, so I put it in a drawer. And then fast forward a few more months, and I read about Amazon's Kindle publishing platform, which was the digital platform at the time is what they called it, and I published, and then I made the huge mistake. If anyone out there is thinking about writing, don't make this mistake. I wrote a book, and I published it, and then I didn't write another book for at least a year, and that was my first of many huge mistakes. But boy, it was a different world back in 2010 when I first published. That was a long answer.
That's okay. We have plenty of time. Nobody's charging us by the hour or anything to use this hangout. So I'm kind of curious, when you wrote that first book, were you originally thinking this could be a series, or did you just write it as a standalone novel thinking that would be it?
It was a standalone until I got to the end. And then I thought, this could be, I'm going to leave it in such a way that, well, it's a romance, so there's a happily ever after for the couple. And because they're both still alive, you could potentially have more books in the series. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I realized I sort of retconned myself and created the series based on things I had put in the first book without really thinking I was going to make a series out of it.
And with a romance, because I actually did this in book one of my series, I just was going to do it as a standalone, and it was a romance, and they got together at the end, and why would this become a series? But I had a lot
Yeah,
of fun with it, and I wanted to write more, so I took it on from there. I'm curious, have you had challenges? I noticed you're in, time travel. I think science fiction time travel on romance or on Amazon, and then also time travel romance.
right.
Have you had trouble? I don't know. What you're using the same characters, right?
Yeah, and I am straddling genres, which is another thing. Potentially, you open yourself up to a much wider audience, but you also alienate a lot of people along the way who want pure science fiction, or they want the science fiction time travel, they don't want the romance, or vice versa. So I have a lot of different elements in the books. They're not just romance; they're also mystery, and there's a little paranormal. Um, so that was difficult, but it is the same couple, and it's became a sort of like a time traveling thin man. Is how I like to look at it. That's probably not what it is, but in my little brain, that's what it is.
Right. Well, it kind of reminds me of like Quantum Leap, I guess, where you set it up with the time travel that they could do all sorts of different things. So
Right.
I was just curious if like if somebody checking out book five was expecting it to be a complete self-contained romance, if you had any trouble with that, or if most of the fans are people who came in with book one and are enjoying following the couple along.
Yeah, I really haven't had a lot of trouble with romance readers coming in at that point. I think I probably have more historical fiction readers, or they realize that it's a series, a true series, and in my mind, more like a serial where the growth of the characters and their relationship throughout the series is as important as the individual stories. But yeah, it is quantum leapish in that they go back to different time periods and different locations in each book, which was another big mistake. So because it makes my life exponentially more difficult, and is one of the reasons why I am one of those plotters.
Yeah, I could see with historical fiction, people expect you to do a lot of research and really get the era correct. So I could see where you'd have to do different research for each novel.
Yeah, exactly. And I treat each one as I would if I were writing historical fiction. I try to be as accurate with every detail as I can. And so I spend a couple months just researching each book. If I had been smart and just set it with Highlanders and just ignore the rest of it, I'd be gold by now. But that's not what I did.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned those Highlanders because I wrote a dystopian time travel romance with my pen name where they go into the future, kind of a
Mm,
sucky future. And because I was looking at the time travel category on Amazon, like this doesn't look that competitive, like you could get in the top 100 with, I don't remember what it was at the time, but it wasn't a lot of sales.
yeah,
But I kind of found out as I published my book and as I was looking at the top 100 that it was like Highlanders or Vikings, maybe medieval something or other, but people all
yeah.
wanted to go back in time and they had these very specific popular time periods. Have you had any trouble with that, like meeting what the expectations are from those readers?
I get a lot of requests to put my hero in a kilt. That's probably the number one request I get. And one of these days I'm going to do it, but I have resisted so far. My thing has been sort of more modern history. So the book I'm writing now is the farthest we've gone back in time. It's the Revolutionary War. And but most of it is 20th century, really, with a little 19th century thrown in. But yeah, it's hard to compete with those Highlanders. They're everywhere. And they're
Yeah,
hot, they're
yeah.
hot.
You put them on a kilt and then have no chest or no shirt.
Yeah,
It's hard to compete with that.
a Highlander who shaves his chest. But there's a lot of those out there, and I was another decision I made with the books was not to go. There's no clinch, there's no couple, there's no shirtless guy, because it just didn't fit my books. So I wanted to be honest with the readers, but it's another marketing thing that if I had a lot of money and could do it all again, I'd probably get people on the covers. I love my covers, but I think that's a potential marketing drawback.
Yeah, all right. Well, we're going to ask you some more about the marketing a little later, but I am curious if you had recommendations, if people were going to write a time travel story, um, would you recommend not doing it if it's not in the popular tropes, or just are there any, I don't know,
No,
any expectations they shouldn't have or should have?
I would never say don't do it. I would say do it with your eyes wide open. It is still a smaller genre, which is good in that you can, as you say, you can get into the top 100 with fewer sales than you can in a lot of other romance subgenres. But it is dominated still by Highlanders, and if you're willing to stand in Dinah Gabaldon's shadow for the rest of your life, go for it, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, she just dominates the bestseller list perennially. It never stops. All of her books. But I say write what this is what I do. Write what you love. Write what interests you. All of these different time periods I think are fascinating. I'm one of those sort of jack of all trades, master of none people. And so I love all sorts of things, and that's why I've written the series the way it is. And so I would advise them to, if you love the Highlanders, go for it. But if you're forcing it, maybe a Viking.
All right. Well, and I will say for anybody that's curious, I did actually sell books with the pen name dystopian time travel romance, but it had a really awesome cover, but that wasn't enough to really make it stick up there in the top. And
that's tough though. The future dystopian stuff. That's again mixing. It was a romance.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough. That's a lot of asking, because they really like the manly men and the in the time travel romance, the chivalry, and they really like the knights and all of that stuff. So going forward, it's a little, Gattaca.
Yeah, I think we kind of romance the historical periods too, as opposed to. It's hard to romance and think, fondly about some dystopian future where the world sucks.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I found is there's a lot of romanticizing, of time periods that it's not romantic really at all. It, stinks on ice to be in 1700s England. I mean, you got smallpox everywhere and head lice. It's just not romantic. But we all pretend it is, and they never use the bathroom.
Yes, outhouses and chamber pots are not that fun.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, let me pass you to the guys for some more questions, and then we'll jump into the marketing a little bit later.
Okay.
All right, so my first question here is, the first couple of my questions have been touched upon a little bit, but we're going to delve deeper. Time travel is frequently used to create phenomenally complex plots, while other times it's used just as a way to change the setting. What are your thoughts on how you use it, and which do you think is the more valuable usage?
I think it depends on what you want to accomplish. If you're doing more, if you have this idea and you simply want to set it, like you said, it's a setting change for a cool idea. To all these great historical backdrops, add something fresh to perhaps kind of a tried and true idea. I personally like playing with the real time travel-y aspect of changing history and what those ripple effects mean, and living in that time period and observing it from the outside. I think that's one of the things I like the most, is my characters can have a commentary, unlike in historical fiction where there's no context.
Yeah, I was like, one of the things I was going to ask was if you explore rippling changes, the whole butterfly effect thing when they make changes in time, because I know a lot of times, particularly when we're going with the romance style time travel, it's just you might as well just be going to another country where things are still like that.
Yeah, there is a lot of that, especially as you say, in time travel romance. I think that's why mine can fit a little more comfortably in science fiction time travel, because not just because my couple is a couple and they're married and they're having a kid now, and so the romance isn't will they, won't they, get together. It's much more about their relationship and then the adventure that they go on. They get assignments from something called the Council for Temporal Studies. And so they're sent back, something has changed in time, and they're sent back to fix it. And so that's integral to all of my plots. And I really enjoy that aspect. I do sometimes, though, get that time travel headache where you're in that paradoxical loop and your plot is just like sand slipping through your fingers. And it's there, and then it's not there. It's there, and then it's not there. And that's just part of writing time travel, is at some point you just have to accept that it functions within your world and move on.
Yeah, I've written one time travel story, and it's sort of hilarious because you have to kind of write the whole story as one chunk. Like you can't take a narrative path through because if there's any loop back or if there's any changes to be to keep track of, you really need the whole thing as a block. Although you were saying that you do a lot of research anyway, so it seems like you plan out your stuff well ahead of time.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of. I'm a definite plotter, and so I do a lot of outlining to make sure I don't have any of those inconsistencies with the time travel. And because I do have things that fold back in on themselves and characters that are in that sort of, I can't remember what it's called, but in a loop, a temporal loop, where you realize that the beginning is the end. I won't say anything about Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones.
Nice. Yeah. So continuing on from the previous question, and you again touched on this a little bit, depending on what usage of time travel you're going for, you can attract some very different readers. Have you had any like major problems with people expecting a certain thing and not getting it, well, first answer that question, I guess.
Well, I think the only real pushback on that front I had was having a vampire in the first book. We were like, holy moly, there's a vampire in this book. So, yeah, it said it. I tried to say it in the blurb, and you can't rely on that. And I think that really threw a lot of people. They don't like paranormal mixed in. Some people, even though you're sort of already in the paranormal realm because of time travel, but
yeah,
that's just a conceit to them. So but I think that's really the only sort of cross-genre type pushback I've gotten on that front. And I think I've done pretty well historically. I do get a few comments where, someone says, and they were absolutely right, that I had a book in 1929 New York, and my characters had wedding rings on. And I didn't realize that wasn't really a common thing for a man to wear until World War II. And so a reader sent me an email and explained. My readers have been great, though. They've been very helpful whenever I managed to screw up.
Yeah, again, when you talk about doing major research and trying to, have historical fiction style tellings of the past, I can imagine that I would imagine it being a minefield of fact checking from the audience.
It absolutely is, and I find myself falling down rabbit holes every day as I'm writing, thinking, oh, well, she'll order tomato juice. Oh, my God, was there tomato juice in this year? And then finding out there wasn't tomato juice in that year. The crazy things, like little tiny things, the minutia can kill you.
Yeah, there was a point, and this is a story that was actually never written, but I remember I'd done some research in which I had to figure out when bananas became common. Turns out it had a lot to do with refrigerated train cars.
There you go. A lot of food stuff it's the transportation of things, and yeah, that's a question you never thought you would ask yourself, and now you know.
Yep.
I'm full of things like that.
It's handy. All right, so with over 5 years in the business, which I guess technically I also have, I don't keep a running tally of exactly what number of years I have. Particularly with the sort of release frequency that self-publishing affords, have you had any troubles with series fatigue, either by running out of ideas or simply producing a series that was too difficult to attract new readers to?
Well, that definitely has been a problem. I think it was probably around book 5 or 6, I personally started feeling series fatigue. And the series was still doing well enough, and I make my living doing this, so I'm just doing all right. But I definitely felt the need to have more entry points into the series because each book can't be read. Really can't be read out of order, and so that's a problem when you only have the one funnel for your readers. And so I started thinking, I've got to do another series, so I wrote book 6 instead of doing the new series, and then eventually finally I spun off one of the characters, and I'm slowly starting to build that sort of side series, but that is a definite problem. I probably should have stopped, planned. If I had my druthers, I would have gone back and probably planned a 6-book series and then several spin-offs.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to do when either you didn't expect to have a series at all, or you find that your readers mostly just like these characters, and it becomes difficult to do anything new because, well, it either won't have those characters, or it'll have an enormous background that you need to be aware of. So, yeah,
Yeah,
multiple entry points is hard to design too, particularly with a long-running series.
yeah, that is definitely problematic because my readers really enjoy Simon and Elizabeth, my main characters, and I just think, well, where should I send them now? And so it's this very vague. I have a couple sort of mini arcs that cross a few books, but it's episodic in that sense, and um, that is difficult to bring new readers in to the series. So I'm definitely struggling with that, and I'm trying. I wrote a romantic comedy, sort of cozy mystery, and it was DOA, absolutely DOA. Did not transfer at all.
Yeah, it's tricky stuff. I guess one thing you have going for you, particularly with a long-running time travel series, is in theory, it wouldn't be impossible to basically hit a reset button. Like, well, everything's changed now, and then
Right.
suddenly
I think
see
I
a
would
character's new situation.
like. I think if those are my dogs. If you heard that out there, the can you ask that again?
This being a time travel setting, it's not
Oh,
outside the realm of
retcon.
possibility you could hit a reset button.
Yeah, that as a comic book reader, I don't know if I can really bring myself to truly retcon my universe because it makes me so angry as a reader. My semi-crafty plan is to spin off, as I said, one of the characters, and then I'm setting up another character. But they do bring a lot of baggage with them, as you said. There's a lot of background character setup, and trying to get all of that in seamlessly in the first couple chapters to get people up to speed is definitely difficult.
Absolutely. Speaking of comic books, it'd be kind of interesting if you could pull the, as seen in issue number 5 situation, where you can sort of give people, as they're reading, an indication of what books they would have had to read to understand.
Wouldn't that be great to have little editor's notes like they did? That would be terrific.
Yeah. All right, that's my questions for this section, so I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for a few more.
Okay.
Alrighty. I've always been fascinated about time travel as well, and I enjoy exploring the ripple effects, as you've mentioned. So my question for you is, since you've already mentioned that fans have no qualms about letting you know certain things aren't possible or plausible, if you get enough corrections, will you actually go back and correct your work and fix it?
Yes, I have. I absolutely went back, and what I tend to do is what I did with the wedding ring was I wrote a conversation between the characters where one of them knew about it and the other one didn't, and so I sort of fixed that part. But yeah, I'm absolutely willing to go back and fix whether I have the wrong amount for something, that people will research the cost of living, how much would a room for let in 1770 London cost, and someone will correct me, and I will absolutely go back and fix it.
Do you fix like for every single little minor correction, or do you wait till you have like a big long shopping list of things to correct?
If it's an easy fix, it's almost like a typo. I'm happy to fix it on the fly. That's one of the great things about being self-published is I just go to my master and in either Vellum or Scrivener and fix it and spit out the new versions.
Good deal. Okay, so I'm not the only one. Okay, because nothing will annoy the hell out of me more than having the editor look at it, the proofers, the beta readers, and everything, and I'm looking at a print copy, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so it's time to go through the process to get everything fixed again. But okay, with regards to that ripple effect, seeing how you mentioned that you enjoy writing about it as well, have you ever considered doing like what I would call pulling like a Star Trek or an X-Men move, where you go back in time, change something, and all of a sudden the whole timeline changes, and you could theoretically start over?
I have done something like that where it was a potentially disastrous situation, though it wasn't really a starting over. It would have, in my world, it would have eliminated all of my characters. But it was in one of my Jack the Ripper books. And Jack the Ripper was, spoiler alert, was a time traveler. Of course. But I did something like that where time was in flux, and my characters were shifting in and out of the various time periods. just emotionally in their own minds. So their level of understanding for each other was constantly changing, and that was really challenging. Like they either wouldn't remember the other person, or they'd only remember the first month they knew them, and that was a lot of fun to play with. But boy, that was tough to keep track of.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was just thinking, like, I did my own time travel fantasy type of thing there, and I remember trying to write it out and trying to keep track of everything. I was like, I had notes everywhere. I almost pulled a Sherlock, from the elementary thing where you see like that little yarn going everywhere. I almost had to do that to keep track of everything. So, okay, you've got like a multi-book series like that. How do you keep track of everything? What's the secret?
I wish I knew. I really have thought about hiring someone to do a series Bible for me because I don't have one. It's all just I'm constantly looking it up and asking my editor, what was his name, or little things like that. I don't know. I think because the only explanation I can give for my consistency so far is that I just love what I do. And so I love the books, I love the characters, I think about them all the time. It's probably not healthy, but they're constantly with me, and so the history of them feels as real as my own.
Yeah, I always tell people if you enjoy what you're doing, work becomes fun, and you don't want to ever stop. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so my final question for you in this category is, if you were to, let's say a brand new author comes up to you and says, hey, I've been following your work, I'm going to do something similar, write a multi-book series, whatnot. What advice would you give them? I mean, is there anything that you would have done differently a second time if given the chance?
I would have plotted it out. I would have plotted them all out ahead of time, just sketches. But I had this great idea for something that I could have done from book 1 on and would have had this beautiful payoff. And I didn't do it because I didn't think of it until book 8. If I had thought of it at book 1, it would have been so good. Even now, I'm still tempted to go back and sneak it in to the earlier books. So that would be my number one piece of advice is just have your overarching plot planned and just have sketches of each story, because then you can have this meta story happening at a level that will pay off beautifully for your readers at the end. And it's that I really wish I had done.
Good to know. I like plotting everything else out as well. I usually don't do that. I mean, I've got my own series, and I don't really spend my series are typically each story is like a little standalone thing set in the same world there. So I haven't tried that multi-book arc yet, though. So I might down the line. But
it's challenging. Right. It's fun.
Yeah, it sounds like. I mean, you're telling me all these things. I'm like, well, I know what to do if I ever get to that point. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, let me hand you over to Lindsay. She's got the start of the marketing questions for you.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, like what we were talking about earlier, you're probably publishing 2 to 3 novels a year, and that being more feasible for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah.
So I guess one thing that's great is that you've managed to keep your series alive and selling, and that's not easy to do. I'll be the first to admit that, like, once you stop focusing on one series or wrap it up, sales naturally tend to fall off unless you're always out there promoting it. Do you have any tips for what you've been doing to keep it alive when you've got a little longer between releases?
One of the things I've done is I've been more and more active on Facebook. Nurturing fans, nurturing those, golden fans that you want out there, the ones who tell people to read your books. They do more work than most promotions you can do. I have used and abused things like BookBub as much as humanly possible. Also, creating box sets has helped me leverage a lot of those promotions in new ways. So I might, in the beginning, have only been able to run promotions on book 1 or book 2, and book 1 is perma-free. But then I created 2 separate box sets for books 1 through 3 and 4 through 6, and I've been able to use BookBubs for those in addition to the individual books, and so that's really helped me extend the life, and just gives you more points of entry. The more covers you have, basically, out there, more units. So that's been, I think, the main thing.
Yeah, I've talked about that before on here too. I still love the box sets, like the books 1 through 3, and not only does it give you a thing you can advertise, like you were saying, you can even try messing around with a different blurb and kind of trying some different categories and things when you do that. So I think that's a great thing to give a try if people haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, on Facebook, are you doing advertising at all, or is it mostly like having an author page and just posting regularly?
I have been doing some advertising. In fact, I just got an email from some Facebook person wanting to talk to me about leveraging my platform. And other than sounding a little dirty, I'm going to talk to them and see what they suggest as far as maximizing the ads I've run. Most of it has simply been pushing people to book one. So I know there's a lot more I can do with Facebook advertising. I've been predominantly using it just to cultivate readers with my Facebook page. And like I just ran a contest where people could have a character named after them in one of the upcoming books. And that's when it just gets them excited. They talk about, I ask them what their favorite character is, and that sort of interaction is really, really gold because they get enthusiastic about it and they tell other people and they tell me they tell other people. So that sort of grassroots stuff has, I think, really paid off for me.
All right. Yeah, one of the challenges with Facebook advertising I found, especially when you have a free book one, is that you're kind of paying quite a bit for clicks sometimes
Yeah.
in order to give away a book.
I know. It is maddening. It is absolutely, and just giving away a book is still, I mean, I've been doing that for years now. I've, probably given away 1 million copies of this book. But it is still, I think, one of the most tried and true marketing techniques, having the perma-free, but having to pay to advertise the perma-free, and in a way that you can't, we can't really see the conversion rate because, they're going from Facebook to Amazon, so that's a little frustrating. I'm hoping that maybe I can find ways to advertise on Facebook with the box sets, a little higher priced items. I put together an 8-book box set that was originally a special thing with Kobo. And that did well, and then that's now it's at regular price. It's asking a lot for people to fork out for a relatively unknown author. So, but it's another possible thing to do.
Yeah, I've been meaning to give that a try myself. I think we actually had Mark from Kobo on here a few weeks ago, and he was like pointing out, yeah, we don't have that cap at $9.99.
No,
you
they
can
don't.
You can make your book $25, and we'll give you 75 or 70% if you sell it.
Yeah, that's great. And I did a promotion with them with that book, which was terrific. That mega set, and it's up on a couple other sites where I can get the good royalty share, unlike Amazon, for over $9.99.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you mentioned that your first book has been perma-free. Are you still seeing that's pretty effective for getting people to buy your books, or do you feel like since Kindle Unlimited has come along, we've talked about people seeing kind of poorer results now that people can subscribe and get anything in the catalog basically for free?
Yeah, that definitely hurt. It hurt a lot. I wish Kindle Unlimited into the cornfield, but it's not going anywhere soon, and so I either have to, join it, play with them, or just ignore them. And there's nothing I can do. I think I don't think my book would bring more readers in if I priced it at 99 cents. What I am considering doing is actually offering the first 3 books for 99 cents because the series is so long now. But yeah, then you're just slowly eating away, at your books when you do that. And maybe it's a losing proposition in the end, but it's something I think I'll probably try this year.
Yeah, I've done that whenever I can get a BookBub ad.
Yeah.
I'll keep the 3-book set low, like it's $3.99 or $4.99 anyway, and then if I can get a BookBub ad for, of course I'll drop it to 99 cents. And I'm the same way. I've got like 8, 9 books in most of my series that people can go on to read. So if you can get it to stick too for a little while, it really brings a lot of new readers in. So that's great.
Yeah. So I think I will definitely. It's a little scary to think 3 books. I bled for these books. It's like a year and a half of my life, for 99 cents. But I think I'll give it a shot.
Cool. Yeah. Have you considered KU at all, or have you just stuck to being wide the whole time?
I've stuck to being. Well, I did select when it first came out, And then, when was that? Gosh, that was 4 years ago? Long time ago now. But I've been wide since. I've been lucky enough to make some decent headway on Kobo, and inching my way up in both Barnes & Noble and iTunes. A little slow on Google Play, but I don't think I can reverse course now. I would guess probably 45% of my income is non-Amazon income, so that would scare the bejesus out of me, and I would piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, having started before KDP Select was even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely gathered a lot of readers, same, especially on Barnes & Noble and Kobo for me. Have you, I guess we get a lot of people that they want to do worldwide. They like the idea of not being exclusive with Amazon, but sometimes they go in and out.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them haven't been able to make headway on the other sites.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for selling more on the other ones?
Gosh, I really lucked out with Kobo. I just somehow got some traction there. I really don't know. This is before they had the promotions. I think if I were doing it now, I would say get in those promotions, keep trying them, and you have to stay the course for a while. I think yo-yoing your books in and out doesn't help. I totally understand thinking I've been on Kobo for 2 months and I've made $10, and thinking I can't do this. But if you can, I would try to gut it out for 4 to 6 months and push as much promotional stuff as you can on Kobo. It's tough because they're just, as you know, and probably everyone out there knows, there's really not a lot of effective advertising for non-Amazon sites. And there's a lot of readers, and it's just sort of a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, I'm still kind of trying to crack the iTunes nut. Joe does pretty well there, but I do sell books. I don't mean to say like, oh, it's horrible. I've never sold a book on Apple, but I've had more luck, I should say, in Barnes & Noble and Kobo. But I know Apple has like a really huge amount of users, so I assume readers too. So I would love to do better there. I'll figure it out one day.
Yeah, well, it's a funky site, and I think one of the keys there is getting a rep, as it is on all the sites. Because once you get a rep, then you can get a little more attention and maybe in a few more promotions than you would otherwise. I think that's probably as true on iTunes as it is on Amazon.
Yeah, definitely. And I have found that with the box sets, those have been the things that have really done well for me on Nook and Kobo especially. I think people really like the sales there. And of course, having the perma-free, I feel that helps, just being out there where people can find them. I think it may even do more on the other sites than it does on Amazon now, because the other sites don't have the subscription program.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I wish we could go free direct on Barnes & Noble, not have to pull the shenanigans with Smashwords or draft to digital that we have to do.
Yeah, all right, well, those are my questions in the marketing topic, and my light just got really dark. I don't know what happened. Nobody's watching. But yeah, let me hand you to Joe to ask a few more questions.
Okay.
Yep. As before, lots of my points here have been discussed. Actually, I ended up asking one of my questions in the previous section, so some of this is on the fly, everybody.
Woo!
All right, so you were talking about how you had some promotions wide with Kobo and whatnot. Do you ever put any specific marketing besides special promotions into certain storefronts? Like, do you ever decide today, this month we're going to work on Google Play?
No, I really, and I should. I just honestly don't know how. If I like Google Play, for instance, what do you do? I don't know. I can't even find books from the storefront on that site. I don't know how anyone finds books on that site, so I can't begin to understand how to sort of not game it in a bad way, but how to figure out how readers are finding them and get my books in front of them. That's just a puzzle.
It really is. It's sort of telling, again, like you were saying, that there's not a lot of advertising that's effective on anything but Amazon. It sort of explains why Amazon is so big, because of how successfully they were able to become the primary funnel for advertising.
Yeah, and you notice on when I do my book bubs, I'm sure you guys have the same experience that it's massive on Amazon, and then I do next is definitely Barnes and Noble still does really well, and then iTunes and Kobo is still just this tiny little thing. So those readers are out there, they're signing up for at least BookBub's marketing emails. Why is there not? Why? I cried to the heavens. Why aren't there advertising marketing sites for Kobo and the rest of it?
Yeah, it's a little disheartening. But as you were saying, that there's definitely the aspect of, and it's not useful, advice, but getting a rep. Like
Yeah.
it seems like every one of those storefronts eventually will contact you if you are a heavy enough hitter. But the problem is, so in order to become successful, I have to become successful.
Right. Well, isn't that the great paradox of selling books? That the more books you sell, the more books you sell.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned briefly earlier about covers. We've spoken a lot about the value of having an easily identifiable brand just at a glance, and you obviously have done this with your Out of Time series. Was that cover or design your idea, or did you work with a designer?
I actually designed a different cover, very similar to this, but DIY when I started out. But it was the Watchwork gears and a similar font, just done with GIMP and very little knowledge. And then once, I think I was probably book 2, I realized I needed a professional cover and I needed one that I could, use as a brand for easily identifying the series moving forward. Excuse me, and it seems, I suppose to some, as an easy way out to use the same image and simply change the wash. And it is, but it works, so I'm thrilled.
Well, sometimes things are easy because they're smart.
Yeah, it just worked out in this case. I'm very, very happy with it.
Yeah, it's and if you should check out her shelf on Amazon and see, like, it's the same, almost exactly the same cover, but again, different color wash, and just at a glimpse of any one of those covers, you can tell that obviously these are all in the same series, but you can even tell what the series is about, because as you said, there's like watch workings on the cover. It's evocative of time travel.
Right.
All right, so we're talking a little bit about what your primary focus for advertising is, and you were saying how you still have to funnel people back to the first books in the series, and now you said you were messing with box sets.
Right.
Do you think you're going to have any sort of, like, I want to say, do you find that keeping your eyes open for new types of promotions, like box sets weren't always marketable, like, do you spend a lot of time looking for the next thing, or do you feel like you should just be working on what's working now and getting better at it?
No, I'm always I'm part of a few writers groups where we just share what we find, what we see. I wouldn't say I put a lot of time into it, but when you have a lot of eyes looking and just thinking, well, what is that next thing? Like the multi-author box sets, when they hit, everybody jumped on that, and that's waning a little bit. Some people are still making hay with them, but no, I'm always keeping an eye out, but I try not to spend too much of my work time on marketing. It's just too much of a time sink, and I have gas lamps to learn about and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the trick, and it's the biggest. I want to say the biggest criticism that people tend to have of independent publishing is, like, I didn't start writing so that I could be an advertiser. I started writing so I could be a writer. And,
yeah.
Yeah.
I recently did a talk at the Jambalaya Writers Conference in Louisiana, and it was writing is the easy part. And sometimes, well, that's not really true, but it's a little pithy. But if you're a self-publisher, you're a publisher, and you have to do all that jazz.
Yeah. I remember I remember when I first sort of discovered the amount of work that goes into a successful book launch and successful marketing, and I was like, this is why there's an entire industry to do this for me.
Absolutely.
And just one last, this sort of isn't a marketing question, but because I sort of asked 2 of my questions earlier. I'll pretend this is in the first section.
Okay.
We were talking about how you go back and make subtle changes to make corrections, and then there's the like, oh, this is a brilliant idea I had. I wish I had done that in the beginning. A thought I had, which is probably a terrible idea, but many of my thoughts are. These being ebooks, it's feasible for you to literally change history. You can like have an event in a later book, literally rewrite earlier books and have them changed. And I think that would, if nothing else, that would be an amazing gimmick where it's like, hey, everybody, go back and read the entire series because there's new scenes everywhere because of these people doing this.
Oh my God, can you imagine? That gives me a headache just thinking about it. It makes my brain explode. I had one book where I did actually have an entire book that didn't take place, where it started with a little scene and we went off on this adventure, and at the end of the book they had to erase that part of time. And so the book ends with the very same scene with just these little tiny differences because history isn't exactly the same anymore. And not many people picked up on that. A few readers did, but they were tickled.
Yeah, it's an excellent concept that you can mess with. And again, time travel is a fantastic tool, and I really need to mess with it more. I've actually promised one of my friends that I have to write another time travel story because the story I wrote that included time travel didn't have the time travel he wanted.
You know, it's not a bad time to get into time travel because I don't know whether y'all are television watchers, but it's a recent upfronts, which is where when they sell the advertising space for upcoming TV shows. 4 of the 5 networks have time travel shows coming up this fall. So something's happening.
Yeah, and as has been illustrated with an awful lot of other things, whatever's on TV, whatever's big in popular culture, tends to really spike the associated genres in books.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that concludes my question, so I'll hand you off to Jeff for the last set.
Alrighty. Okay, with regards back to the marketing there, you've done a lot of different types of advertising, so my question would be is, have you found anything that just doesn't pan out? You don't get a good return of investment, just not worth your time?
Gosh, you know, that would really be site-specific. I haven't found any sort of techniques. I really haven't explored beyond the really traditional methods of advertising or marketing, what I consider the new traditional methods, if there is such a thing. So I really haven't found anything. I suppose book giveaways, I don't think really, you know, when you're doing paperback book giveaways, a lot of people think, you know, get people to sign up, and I think giveaways in general, for me, in my experience, have had a low return because you just get a lot of people who want the free item but aren't really in any way attached to you know, follow up or read the series. So they cash that gift card and then they're...
That's one way to look at it. Yeah, I've kind of noticed the same. I like giving away copies of the book just knowing that these physical copies are, you know, scattered all across the planet essentially. But yeah, it's, when you go to ship them, when you go to host a giveaway and you see the winners from, you know, like the Far East, you're like, damn, that's going to be a hell of an expense. But okay, so conversely, if you flip that around, is there anything that you think that more you found it to be just unbelievably effective?
Unbelievably effective.
You know, like we all know BookBub, obviously, 'cause that's, you know, if you can afford it, that's an awesome way to, you know, make a lot of sales. But, you know, anything that you like, oh, wow, I never would have imagined this did so well and would have done so well.
You know, I would say, again, I'm going to go back to just engaging with the readers on Facebook. I get a surprising amount of author email and PMs from people. I just told my aunt about this, or I think getting those, I can't remember who came up with it, but the 100 superfans, the 1,000 superfan theory really goes a long way, because once you send out those tendrils, that really grows exponentially. But it's engaging with them in a very honest and personal way, not in sort of a, hey, you know, marketing sort of, you know, just be yourself.
All right. Mailing lists, do you use them?
Absolutely. It's another thing I wish I had done immediately.
Yeah, you and me both. Let's not go down that road. But okay, what strategies do you use to entice more people to sign up? Do you do giveaways? Do you like offer like free short stories? I'm just curious.
I don't have currently any reader magnets, which I need to do. I've never written a short story. It scares me. I don't know how to stop. So I'm a little afraid to write a short story, but I really need to do it. I think they're a great tool to give that away to get people on your mailing list. I do all the usual stuff. It's the mailing list is all the backs of the books and all of those sorts of things. I definitely need to get on the reader magnet bandwagon, but I've been only being able to put out, as we said, 2 or 3 books a year. The idea of carving off more time out of that, because it would have to be in my series, it would have to fit in my series, so it would have to be this historical something, which would involve research, and I can't spend a weekend and just write a well, maybe I could spend a weekend and write a hot tawdry story, but I'm not sure it would bring readers to my series.
Okay, I know Joe is probably curious about this, but have you ever started a short story and it ended up as a novella or a full-blown novel?
No. This was the first book of my series was the first prose I'd ever written, and all the books I've published, everything I've ever written. Apparently, I'm not a very good judge of my own stuff. But no, I've never written short story.
Alrighty. Okay, so social media, we know you use Facebook, and it's definitely a very valuable tool to get in touch with your friends, your readers, your fans, and whatnot. Are there any other platforms that you use, and are there any that you avoid like the plague?
I have not gotten on either the Instagram or Pinterest boat, although I think those would actually probably fit. Maybe Pinterest and Instagram are things because I could use images from all this historical stuff. There's lots of cool things. I haven't leveraged those. And those are definitely something I could, I think. I have avoided, for the most part, Twitter, just because to me it's just static. I just don't get it. It's just noise. So, and I know some people who use it exceedingly well and have a lot of followers and fans and interact and do really fun, clever things. They like the short story people. They'll actually do like a little mini story and who use it really well. But that's something I haven't embraced.
Yeah, I have the same thing as the people's like, oh yeah, you need to get on Twitter and do this or that. I was like, okay, and I know we've interviewed a lot of people that have really good success with Twitter. Is this, I have not figured out yet how to best use it to my advantage, so I'm holding off on that one until I can either figure it out or something new comes along. You never know.
Right. Let me know if you figure it out.
Will do. All right, that wraps up my questions. Let me hand you back to Lindsay so we can start to wrap this up.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're just about through our questions. I guess one final question would be to anybody who's out there that's just getting started now. Maybe they finished their first novel and they're about to put it out. Do you have any recommendations or advice that you haven't yet given?
Gosh. I would say find people like yourself, whether it's in person or through, I met a bunch of writers from my very first writers group through an extension course at UCLA that I took on writing, and we just kept meeting once the class ended. And that gave me so much. It gave me confidence. It gave me feedback. So find a writers group, whether it's online or in person, and things like, although I don't frequent it as much, but K-Boards is still valuable. And there are a lot of really good books. I still think David Gaughran, however you say his name, Gaughran, his books, Let's Get Digital and Let's Get Visible, are still really valuable for someone starting out.
All right, great advice. And yeah, I thought a workshop was really helpful too. I did an online one, and half the thing was just seeing other people, like they would list who got publishing deals and things, and I'm like, oh, I was writing at the same time as those guys because I'd kind of come in and out and get busy and stuff. And I'm like, if they can do it, I'm sure I can do it. And so there's like a lot of motivation in having other people doing it with you too. Yeah,
well, it is a lonely thing to do, and it's easy to feel, especially if you're friends and family don't understand that a lot of people don't have supportive friends and family when they want to try and do something like this. And so finding people who are simpatico is really helpful.
All right, great. Well, let people know where they can find you online and which book they should check out.
Well, because I didn't write lots of short series, I recommend you read the first book in my series, Out of Time. Available on all retailers. My website is moniquemartin.weebly.com. I've recently joined a new group of time travel authors, and we have a reader site called heartsthroughtime.com. And if you are a writer, you can come knocking at the door at the Time Travel Romance Author Alliance on Facebook.
All right, I'm going to try to look these up here so I can remember to get them in the show notes. What was the last one? The Time Travelers Facebook Alliance?
It's the Time Travel Romance Author Alliance, and that's the author group on Facebook, and then the reader group is Hearts Through Time.
All right, I'll try to find this for people. If anybody listening at a future date or out when you're walking their dogs or whatever, come on over to marketingsff.com, and this is going to be show number 82, and we'll have it up shortly. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight, Monique. It was great hearing what you have to say.
Terrific. I had a great time. Thank you all so much.
Nice to meet you, Monique. Thanks for all the info.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.